All right, welcome everybody. We're going to do a little bit about soil and fertilizer today. My name's Hunter. I work here at Fossil Creek Nursery. Yeah, let's get it started. So this is going to be specifically about Colorado soils. Colorado soils are unique in the way of how bad they actually are. Um, so yeah, let's get started. So Colorado soils, high clay, high pH, which is hard for plants to take up their nutrients with. The high pH is a huge restriction for things like iron, um, specifically iron. But I'll go into that a little bit more detail later. Another thing with our soil, because it's clay, it's very compacted. When it rains, clay turns very hard. It's almost like a rock in some cases, making it hard to dig. So since it's hard to dig, you can imagine that it's also hard for roots to get through it. So your ideal soil is going to be a clay loam. A loam is a mix of sandy, silts, and clay soil. So it's kind of all in between. There's not really a perfect loam per se in nature. It can be mimicked in a greenhouse or a raised bed per se, but not technically in nature, especially not here. You want to have high organic matter in the soil, and in Colorado, we don't really have a lot of organic matter in the soil. So what you want to do is amend soil. To do this, we use specifically here in our plantings for shrubs, trees, perennials, anything. We want to do 1 part of compost, specifically cottonburr compost, and I'll go into detail why it's cottonburr compost also, to 2 parts of native soil. So the native soil being there is going to encourage the tree, shrub, perennial, etc., to grow into that clay also. It kind of gives it a little boost. It gives it a signal essentially that, hey, this soil is good. If you make the soil too rich or too good in your hole, the plant will actually make like kind of a bathtub type of shape with its roots. And the roots won't be spreading out. So yeah, and I was talking about the Convert compost. Convert compost is fully composted material. Some things like cow compost, for example, has not quite fully been composted, um, and it is very rich. It also has a lot of salts in it. Cottonburr compost is a little less rich, and is why it also is a good amendment for soil. I'll give you an example of what a good use um, for the uh, cow and compost is would be for like a raised bed. You can put an inch or so top of the raised bed and then mix it in. It's going to give you more it's going to give you more nutrients, and it's also going to help with a couple of those micronutrients too, and also with your microorganisms, which I'll talk about a little bit now. There's beneficial bacteria such as Bt in soil with high organic matter. Bt is used to control bugs, specifically larvae. Another beneficial microorganism is going to be Mycorrhizae, which is a fungus system that actually acts as a transport or a translocator for nutrients in the soil. So things like nitrogen that needs to be moved through the soil to properly get to its roots is going to need that Mycorrhizae in there to boost its productivity. So another thing that we use with the um, cottonburr compost is going to be root stem. So root stimulator, it's a fertilome product. We use it in all of our plantings. It has a baseline nutrient. It's got a higher amount of phosphorus. Phosphorus is specifically for rooting and also for flowers, but in this case, we're going to talk about it for rooting. And it also has IAA in it. IAA is a hormone that is actually found in the plant to stimulate root growth. So this root stimulator has a more extra of that, so it gives it a little bit of boost of hormones. So talking about the basic soils here in Colorado, something you can do to fix that is going to be use a sulfur product. We have something called a soil acidifier. As you can see, it's got the sulfur in it, but also some micronutrients. Specifically in this one, you see it's got the iron. Iron is something that we have a lot of issues in being taken up here in Colorado, and that's because iron needs a low pH to be uptaken, somewhere between 6 and 6.5. Our soil here in Colorado is about 8, sometimes even more if there's a lot of gypsum in the soil. Um, And if you want to see an example of how much gypsum is in our soil, sometimes around the Front Range here on the grasslands, you'll see big splotches of white, and that's actually gypsum. So that's actually the water that was seeped up from the ground, evaporated, obviously, and then left over is that gypsum. So that's the white stuff that you see kind of randomly spread throughout our grasslands. So yeah, the pH you want to ideally for all the way around, ideal of nutrient uptake is going to be between 6 and 6.5. Something you can really see this iron chlorosis issue in is a thing like an autumn blazed maple, very popular tree because they're beautiful green in the summer, bright orange in the fall, so it's a lovely looking tree, but it has iron chlorosis problems and it's very susceptible to it. It is easy for it to happen. So that's where the one product, soil acidifier, is going to come in handy for that. It's going to be something that you're going to have to kind of, with autumn blazes, if we're talking about that specifically, you're going to have to really look for those deficiency signs and use it proactively. If we wanted to talk about some trees that are a lot better for our soil, there's honey locust, Kentucky coffee tree, and also a maple hotwings. The Kentucky coffee tree specifically is a super strong tree. It's hardwood, doesn't break in the snow, can take salinity, can take the basic soils. All around really good tree. And it's got a neat leaf structure. It's really full, so it's a good shade tree. So yeah, just something to think about. And also, when I say A-rated, this is A-rated off of CSU's list specifically for Fort Collins. And you can check that out. You can type in CSU trees or CSU tree rating extension, and it has a whole list. I mean, it's almost anything you could think of that you can grow here. It's a really good resource. So, and that's, so we'll talk about that. That is going to be for if you're planting in the soil, using the native soil. I'm going to talk a little bit about raised beds too, building a soil in raised beds. So raised beds, you kind of have a blank slate. So you're not going to be worrying about clay and the basic soil and all that kind of stuff that we're worrying about if we're planting a tree in your backyard per se. So good soil for a garden for a raised bed is going to be one that's got high moisture retention and something that's got good aeration. Something that I specifically and we recommend is using 50-50 peat moss and 50% of potting soil. The peat moss holds water really well, and it also has it's light, so it has a lot of aeration to it. Being a blank slate like raised beds are, you're going to have to supply almost all the different spectrum of nutrients because it's not found naturally in there. So things like micronutrients that you don't think of as much, like calcium, magnesium, iron, zinc, and manganese are things that you're going to need to use. And soil supplements such as bone meal or blood meal, very useful for boosting your nitrogen count. And then there's also Mycorrhizae inoculants that we were talking about earlier, the beneficial fungus. That is really good for using in raised beds, especially for vegetables. It really boosts it up. So, and then I'm just going to go specifically what these nutrients do specifically, and then I'm going to tell you how to read the nutrient count on a bag of fertilizer. So your nitrogen is specifically known for green growth. So early in the season, when you're trying to get big plants, lots of greenery, this is what you're going to want to have a high count of. So if we look at something like this, Happy Frog All-Purpose, that first number, the 6, is going to be the nitrogen count. So this is specifically a veg early season one. So that 6 is going to be nitrogen. All right, and nitrogen, the science behind it is a key factor in protein synthesis. Moving on to phosphorus for roots and for flowers. I remembered it always in school as phosphorus for flowers. Roots, obviously, most important part. So when you're planting, like I was going back to having the root stimulator's got the high phosphorus counts. It's going to boost your root growth. And then another product, really great for things like annuals and stuff, is going to be this blooming rooting. It's actually covered up on here, but it's a 9, 59, 8, 58, 8, and that middle number is your phosphorus. So moving on to potassium. Potassium is on overall plant health and strength. Potassium is also key in protecting from diseases and bugs that kind of boost those natural defenses the plant has. Iron, one thing that we've been hitting on a lot, is it aids in chlorophyll production. So I'll get into the deficiency signs next, but you'll see in plants that have iron deficiencies, they have yellowing between the veins. And that's basically because the plant is becoming anemic and it cannot create chlorophyll. Calcium increases the ammonium, which is nitrogen in the soil, potassium and phosphorus absorption. So it's kind of a booster to all the other things. And then it also increases plant size. Plants that have been early stages of plants that showed calcium deficiencies usually have a stunted growth. But I'll go into that more in just a second. Magnesium, another micronutrient that is really almost a macronutrient. It's a central molecule of chlorophyll in the production of ATP. ATP is a key factor in protein synthesis and also cell division. So this is an energy source for the plant. So it needs this very much. And then sulfur. Sulfur is used for lowering the pH, but also sulfur can be used for amino acids and proteins. All right, so talk about some nutrient deficiency signs. So nitrogen, just starting off, the plant will look pale and yellow, and it'll have on the rim or on the edges of the leaf, it'll show yellowing on the edges. So it kind of starts from the top. If we're looking at a leaf, it yellows down the sides of it. Phosphorus. Oh, also, sorry, nitrogen is a mobile element. So what will happen is the older leaves will show the yellowing. So the plant takes the deficiency from the upper canopy, the newer leaves, and it sends it down the plant. So you'll see this deficiency only in the older leaves. So things at the bottom of the tree or shrub. Phosphorus is also mobile, so it'll show it in the older leaves, and the plants will actually turn really dark green and almost look purple in some cases of deficiencies. This one also starts at the margin, so you'll notice that if we're looking at a leaf like this, it'll be on the edges. Potassium is also yellowing, but bad potassium, it will actually show necrosis spots. So necrosis is the dying of the entire cell, the entire plant, so it's going to be spots on the leaf that will be brown, yellow, dead, even sometimes they'll skeletonize. And this can usually be seen early in the stages of growth. Calcium, I hit on that a little bit, but calcium deficiencies significantly stunt the growth of plants. Low pH in the soil, one thing about calcium, low pH in the soil can create too much absorption of calcium. We're not going to really have that problem here because we have the high pH soil. Something just to think about in your raised bed, especially calcium deficiencies or toxicity can come from too low of pH. All right, moving on, magnesium. So magnesium, it'll actually be a yellowish white to pure white interveinal, which means so between the veins of the leaves. So the main part of the leaves will be very white looking, and this is because chlorophyll is completely stopped from being created. Dead spots will follow. Iron deficiency, talked about this a little bit, but it's the interveinal yellowing of the plant. It's going to be in all the leaves. You'll see it all over. And it's a chlorosis. Chlorosis meaning that it's a yellowing. So yeah, I'm gonna wrap up my part of it, and I'm gonna answer a few questions if anybody's got anything. And all this information, or most all of it, I get from CSU Extensions. It is a great resource to use. Basically, anything, soil health, site CSU, it'll take you to CSU Extensions. Another thing that's really helpful to do is type in, say you're looking for nutrient uses, and then you type site:/edu. And when you type that site:/edu, it will only show you .edu websites. So that's really helpful. Iowa State, Oregon, Cornell, All those schools have really, really good extensions, lots of really good info. Highly recommend. Really good. All right, so if we don't have any questions, I think I'm just going to go ahead and end it here. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll see you next time.